I actually saw the that post that you put on about the men, and
Yeah.
it was moving, and it reminded me that when we talk about burnout and addiction and things like that, in and then in surgery, because I do know a few people like through the PHP and stuff who have had taken their own life, but first of all, in terms of burnout, I mean, the pandemic, yeah, made it worse. But in medicine, in surgery, like there was big studies out of the American College of Surgeons, where 25,000 members were polled, and 40% had burnout, 30% depression, of which at least 15% were major depressive.
Okay, everyone, we're back on another episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast. I'm your friendly orthopedic spine surgeon host, Dr. Stefano Sinacropi, and wellness advocate looking out for you and your families, trying to get you to be CEOs of your own health, but always very excited to have incredibly unique people on our show. And today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Richard S. Hart, who has such a fascinating story, has been a national wrestling champion, a renowned surgeon, general surgeon, who also did liver and other really fascinating types of surgeries. He is a world-class athlete, an innovator. He is now teaching people how to perform at a very elite level in a just a tremendously unique way through his NextGen Surgery program. We're going to talk all about that. So on that note, listen, you got to listen to this whole podcast. This guy is going to just tell it like it is, no holds barred. Listen to what he has to say, learn something, because there's just going to be so many lessons coming up here. Sorry to put you on the spot, Dr. Hart, but again, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. It's only recent that we've been connected, and but I did my research too, and listening to you. I mean, you kill this. I mean, I just loved watching the episodes. You ask the tough questions and you let people be real. And at the end of the day, authenticity and just being who you are is all that matters. I mean, we always fail when we try to be somebody that we're not. So, I love you for doing this, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, listen. I appreciate. I'm so thankful that we were connected through a mutual friend, Dr. Masson, who was on the podcast, and he was awesome. What a great podcast we had with him as well. And just a note on what you just said, and I can't stress it more. Being authentic is the biggest draw into another person. And so it's always being authentic. I want to surround myself with authentic people. And honestly, that's why I was drawn to you. We had one long conversation before we did this show a couple of weeks back. And I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. I just want to hear everything he says. And then really learning your story, it's really, really, it's going to be fascinating for people. So let's start here. Right? You're a renowned surgeon. You've now left surgery to really try to revolutionize the way that we're training people in healthcare and beyond. But before all that, okay, you were a national Canadian champion in wrestling. Tell us a little bit about your journey in wrestling and the lessons really that then translate from wrestling. So when I say like lessons, I talk about big losses you might have had, winning, the art of training and making yourself perform at an elite level day after day, which is so difficult. And people have no idea how hard it is to become a national champion. This isn't like you just go out and you're talented and you do a couple moves and then you're a national champion. So tell us about your journey, however you want, and tell us about lessons learned from your wrestling career and your championship career.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Holy jump. Okay. Well, thanks for that. That's when you hear other people talk about you, that's sort of the best because self-praise is no praise, right? So it's really when when I listen to that, I'm like, holy, I guess that was me, or is me. And I've spent a lot of time sort of talking about it before and being told, oh, you're egomaniacal, or you're a narcissist. And you're like, I'm just telling you like what facts. I'm not, there's no flavor in it. It's just facts. Um, but I was involved in sports since I was a young kid. I mean, my dad was an athlete. His dad was an athlete. My mother's grandfather, I mean, wrestled and speed skated, won, pitchers, my dad, basketball, football, the whole thing. I'm 5'2.5", and with my hair like that, maybe 5'3". So football and basketball, they weren't in it for me. But I played every sport sort of leading up to junior high and all of that. Played rugby, went into England when I was 13 as a scrum half. I'm good size for that and pretty fit for that. But then I got into wrestling. It was in grade 7 that I started wrestling. And I was introduced to it through some rugby friends who were older than me, and I loved it. I mean, I won the provincial championships the first year for my age category, and then I was fortunate. I had great coaches who really taught the basics, right? Like just like anything, I mean, you need to start at the foundations. And so, but then I progressed and so we'll forget all the other sports I did, like rock climbing and all that kind of stuff. But you know, as I progressed sort of through junior high and then high school, I got better. And, eventually was at a junior national level and then senior national and international level. But, the big lesson from sport, in every sport, was as I became more elite, the more basic my training became, right? I went back to first principles.
Mhm.
So, just like in anything, I mean, when you start, you're taught technique, you watch video of other people and yourself to see, where your flaws are, where you can improve, but rarely are you ever given sort of individual things for yourself, and I was fortunate that as I moved through high school and university, we had a mental performance coach in university who was one of the first using applied psychophysiology and EEG and so neurofeedback and biofeedback to actually really get a precise picture of me, not me and my team, me. How am I gonna how do I act? What's my states and what are my traits? And how do I fluctuate between those given the moment that I'm in? And that's really when things start to get, really elite for me, in that I started to really then learn to understand myself. This was sort of the basis then for NextGen Surgery. So, wins and losses,
Hmm.
I had some pretty devastating losses. Like, I mean, when you put your focus on and set a goal that you're going to the Olympics and you don't make that goal, that's devastating because you've for
Yes.
one thing. And so and you look, not everybody can go to the Olympics, and you can train as hard as you want, but winning and losing takes care of itself. But what I did learn is don't put yourself in a position where somebody else can determine your outcome ever. That's a big one. So, 1987, I'm gonna be 58 in 2 weeks. So, 1987 at the senior nationals, I lost a controversial match in the finals. That was the that was the selection for the Pan Am Games. So, it's like Matt Chairman pin,
Yeah.
Matt Judge pin, Matt referee misses it. No video back then. I lose by 2 points. The good thing was is about 6 weeks later at the Canada Cup of International Wrestling, I fought the same guy in the semis. And the American came up to me after and said, "That's what we call ripping someone a new asshole." So,
I love it. That's what I'm talking about.
so and then then the next year at the Olympic trials, I lost in the semifinal. It was, again, I wouldn't say controversial, but there's things you can do in wrestling. Take a little time, pretend you had an injury when there was going to be a big flurry of points. Anyway, I ended up coming third at the Olympic trials. Came fourth at the Canada Cup that year. Got into medical school. I knew I was going to medical school, and I walked away from wrestling for 15 years. I uh, I was convinced I had failed. Like I hadn't achieved my goal. We won the national university championships. I was national champion. The team was national champions, and I thought I failed. So I didn't go watch any wrestling for about 15 years. I didn't talk to people that I had hung out with and everything before, and I probably should have wrestled in medical school. Like I thought I wasn't smart enough for med school because I was always told I wasn't smart enough, and so I figured I need to put everything into just studying to get through medical school. I probably, in retrospect, I probably could have done another Olympic cycle to be where I should have been, because I wasn't. And then 92 potentially could have gone. So that's a regret, actually. That's a regret, and I felt like I quit. I felt like a quitter. But now I've gone back and not so much involved, but my friends are coaches and I go watch and things like that and train again like that.
You just there really is. And of course you're talking about yourself. So sometimes you're like, what is there? There's just so much. There's so much to unpack there. I had Dr. Barron on, and he is the Olympic psychiatrist for years. He's done game after game. He's done game after game. And it's interesting what you said about the devastating losses. And I think on the one hand, we always, we want to say motivational stuff about losing. It makes you better. It makes you, and it's absolutely true, because people that don't take risks and don't take chances of losing, they don't get anywhere. You can't become elite without having the understanding of losing. However, and we could talk about that part of it, but on the flip side, the one thing that really, like, I could just see Barron's face light up when I asked him, a question. I asked him, how common is true symptoms of PTSD after these losses in athletes, because he's worked with Michael Phelps and Simone Biles and all these people. Those are people he works with. And right away, I can just tell him light up. And we got into that subject, and people don't understand, like, it's so complicated getting through becoming elite, because those setbacks can be devastating and lead to things like PTSD. And when you said, and I didn't know this about you, when you said you couldn't even watch wrestling for 15 years, right away in my mind, I'm like, wow, there might have been part of this that's PTSD. Did you have like some classic PTSD, like restlessness, like losing sleep over it, this kind of stuff? Tell me about how it really affected you mentally, and if you ended up going down dark places, when you had these losses.
Those are tough questions, and all right, I haven't spoken about this with people generally outside of discussing it with a physician or something like that. But you're a physician, so
here we go.
let's go for it. What you put yourself through to reach an elite level is, it's unreasonable for the mind and the body, but you push beyond it. It's not unique to me, so I'm not sitting here and going, "Oh, it's just me."
Yes,
everybody, right? The DNA of elite performance is the same, regardless of the domain, right? It doesn't matter, military, sport, surgery, performing arts, but you need to be able to go to a place where you can compartmentalize and you kind of block out pain. And that goes back to sort of the EEG and sort of neurofeedback and biofeedback stuff that we did. Not that they imparted that in us, but you're looking at things, when you're talking about it, you're looking at the different brainwave speeds and their associated cognitive and emotional processes, right? You think about the SEALs and things like that, where theta is the ability to focus attention, alpha to relax and stay calm, SMR, the brief 12 to 15 hertz is like this pre-performance state, like the cat before it pounces. And then you have all your low betas, mid beta, and high beta with like negative self-talk, anxiety, try too hard, intensity. And so you can see, you can get a good psychophysiologic profile on somebody at baseline stress and recovery, and then you'll know how they're going to perform. And so for me, growing up, there were some things that happened. I wasn't tall, and I used to get teased all the time about being short. And it was like, can't do anything about it, like kind of thing. But my parents took me to doctors to see, should we give him human growth hormone and this and that. It's a bit traumatizing as you're growing up. You know what I mean? You don't realize it, and then I wasn't a great student. I was more interested in sport, but I realized I wasn't challenged. But, I was told all the time, you're not smart. What do you mean you're going to go to medical school? You're not the kind of person they're looking for, da, 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 da. And so when I was then in sport, you're hearing all these voices in the back of your head. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. It's like, when the first time I came home from the nationals with a silver, the question was, how come you didn't win? And not congratulations. So, even up until not that long ago, maybe 5 years, having success, I still downplayed it all. And I was always wondering when the shoe's going to drop and that and people are going to find me out that maybe I'm not that great or anything. But, when you look at it, I then, we talked, I'll jump ahead and we'll bring them together. I mean, I think it led to, I burnt out in 2016, 2017. I started the HPB program at St. Joseph's Hospital in Toronto in 2001. There was no center there. People said, you're crazy. You'll never be able to build a center there. Like, the biggest one in Canada is down the street, top 5 in the world. And it was one of those things like, tell me I can't do something and watch me work twice as hard to prove you wrong. Yeah. And so I built it. And with 8 years, it was a center of excellence and all of that. But again, push, not listening to your mind, not listening to your body. So not taking the necessary rest, not necessarily eating well all the time, not necessarily doing things that were in my body's best interest, so to speak. You're young and you think you're invincible, right? I mean, like, this is your universe, and how you treat it is how it's going to pay you back. So I got this torn biceps now. So that's the universe cashing in the checks that I wrote when I was younger. But so, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I did have nights where I would wake up and I was just like, I had tears in my eyes, and I said, I quit. I was a quitter. Like, that's how I felt. And a couple of years before I stopped wrestling, I actually did walk away for 8 months. Like, it was before the nationals. I sliced my finger, cutting a bagel, like right down to the bone. My finger's hanging off. I go to the vascular surgeon across the street, takes me to the hospital, sews my finger back on. I go to my coach, and I wrestled at 48 kilos. Like, I mean, that's a big suck. Like, that's hard to get to. That's 105.5 pounds. Like, you probably weighed that in grade 6, maybe. Like, so I was fighting that internationally. Like, that was a big drop. But I go to his office and my finger's like the size of a sausage, and I got stitches, and I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm like, I can't wrestle. Like, I can't cut weight. I'm gonna get infected. He was so pissed at me, and we're gonna lose the nationals. And I just looked at him. I said, "F you, I quit," and I walked away. And sort of 6 months later, I was like, I quit wrestling. What the hell? So I went back, and sheepishly had to ask if I could come back on the team. And he let me come back on the team, but it was like, I was like the throwing dummy. Yeah, you can come back to practice, but you're not Rich Hart. You're just another person on the team. And, you put me with all of my toughest competition all the time. And it was just boom, 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 boom. And I took some beatings mentally, but I didn't ever show it. And in a couple of months, I was right back to where I was. So, but yeah, so I have issues around feeling like I quit or feeling like I wasn't good enough and all those kinds of things. Spent a lot of time talking about them with people.
No, I mean, listen, I appreciate you sharing that with me, and I can tell. I mean, it's to talking these things. It's interesting, what you said. Two things came up, and I do want to ask you about your upbringing, because it's interesting. One, we both share, and I talk about this, even though, I was pretty good I was good in school. There were so many naysayers around me, and people are just like, oh, you want to go to med school? That's too hard. Oh, maybe you should look at doing something else and this and that. And to be honest, I had doubts, but I didn't really have doubts. But when people tell me I can't do it, that lights a fire. Yeah, I'm just one of those people. Like, it doesn't go the opposite way. I don't get down. I get upset, and I want to show the world. It's just interesting how we share that. But the real cool thing is what you said about when you came home with the silver. And I'm actually in the middle of I don't talk about it a lot in the book because the book is about different things, but I'm in the middle of writing a book, and some of it was about my childhood, very little. It's not an autobiography or anything. It's more about kind of fixing the healthcare system and what we need to do. But my dad, I grew up in an adopted household. My parents were Italian, and my first language was Italian. I always talk about this stuff. But interestingly, my father was very tough. He had a big chip on his shoulder, and he had a big chip on his shoulder too, because he had an adopted son, and I was part black. I tell the story. It's just that we could get into that, whatever. That's my story. We're working on your story. But interestingly, all I remember is no matter what my accomplishments were, it would always be, well, why didn't you do this? I'm like, hey, he would miss a game. He rarely missed my sports games, but I would come home and I would say, he said, how'd you do? I was like, oh, I went 4 for 5 today. He wouldn't say, that's great. He would say, well, what happened the other time? I don't understand. So the reason that I bring that up is because I think that can go both ways. I think in some upbringings, especially when you kind of have tough parenting or whatever, whoever is kind of mentoring you, some people can break. It's just too much, and they're the opposite way. They go down very bad paths, or they're failures, or they need a lot of help, whatever. But a lot of other people, it really, if you listen to a lot of people who became elite, they had that experience in their household where the answer to everything was like, that's okay. Tell me something good, and I'll congratulate you. Even though I mean, they were super proud to other people, but to me,
Yeah.
it was like the expectation level for my level of performance was off the charts in my household. Do you feel like that actually led you to become elite? Did that fuel you to become even better because you wanted to prove yourself even to whichever parent said that? I don't know if that was your dad that was kind of saying things like that, because I heard that all day, every day.
I heard it from, yeah, my dad, my mom. My father's passed away. My mom, she's alive. She was tough on me. She's great. She's praises everybody else, and everyone,
That's
but what you don't know though is that when you're not there, they're praising the hell out of you too. And
Yes.
and
Yes.
that I didn't appreciate that until sort of later on. Uh, and I can sit and think about all the hard times, all the hockey game and that you finish, and my dad was my coach. He'd bench me because I only had one hand on the stick, or nobody else was getting benched for that. I was getting benched for like things that were just crazy. Out on the rink at 5 in the morning. I went into wrestling because my dad knew nothing about it. That was another reason. So after one practice, I knew more than him. He couldn't coach me anymore. He couldn't say whether I was right or wrong or doing good or bad. So, I this whole striving to be better. I mean, it's been there, yeah, my whole life. I mean, I was fortunate in that when people said I wasn't smart, I sort of looked at things and I went, well, no, I just think differently. And I seem to come up with an answer or a solution that's working for me. Sometimes it becomes maladaptive, though, at times, right? Because you become an outlier um,
Hmm.
in how you're doing things. And that's sort of, from sport, you end up as an outlier when you get really good. We were training, some parts of the season, you're training 3 times a day, and then twice a day, and then once a day. I mean, so your whole life is
Hmm.
revolving around these things. The silver one. I would rather win bronze, get bronze than silver.
Because you were
And,
that close.
no, because I had to win the last match. Because
Uh,
you don't win silver, you
I
lose gold.
see.
That's a
I
bit
see.
nutty. You don't win silver, you lose
I see.
gold. So, but the bronze you had to fight for, and you won. Now, in retrospect, sure, the silver's better. But you know what I mean? That was sort of my mindset, though. The other one though is how you practice is how you compete. That's huge. And about character. I mean, you put something the other day I saw, about character, and I said, yeah, character's doing the right thing when no one's watching. And
Yes.
world class doesn't need an audience. And look, when I was younger, you have a lot of bravado. And while I didn't talk about being really good, it's known, or people know it. And then people think you have a chip on your shoulder when you're talking about things. And I became quite defensive, and I was really worried then, what people used to say. about how I was doing things like that. And funny thing is uh, now I don't give a shit what people think. Like, if, for the most part, I mean, I care about what the core people in my life, who matter, whose opinions really matter to me. I mean, if they call me up and go, "Wow, you were on Synchrope's show and you were an ass," then that would matter to me. But I spent a lot of time worrying about what people who I wouldn't go to for advice, but I was internalizing the garbage that they would say about me. You know, that all came through divorce and things like that, and like there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. But even as same as a kid, things I used to be told in Yiddish, "Wie kriegst du mit der kleinen Fies?" Like, where are you going with those broken feet? Like that's when I told my grandfather I was going to go to medical school, he'd be yelling at me, and I mean, there's not too many religious people. He goes, "You move slower than Jesus Christ, and he's dead." Like that's what he said to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what the hell does that mean? So that's why I didn't think I was going to do so well in med school. I was naive. I mean, I think I was just naive. It didn't ever dawn on me that I wouldn't get into medical school. And here I was. I had a terrible high school average. I mean, I was national, medalist and all that, but my grades were terrible. Thank God that the university I went to was a national training center for if you were under 150 pounds, and I just sort of made it like, of course, that's where I wanted to go. But I took sociology, and I did the sciences as a as not subspecialty as sort of the electives. Well, because one, they interfered with training. When you're training 3 times a day and you got labs that go from 2 to 5, that doesn't really work well. But I did social at a university and said, for sure, I'm going to get into med school. Like, everyone's looking at me like, how'd you manage to do that? Like, it's like most people say you're going the wrong way and it's simply a way of your own. But it didn't even dawn on me that I wouldn't get in. And so maybe I was lucky. I don't know. Maybe sometimes ignorance is bliss in that regard.
Well, I'm glad they let you in. I mean, you've done some great stuff, and you're on the precipice of really changing the game with training surgeons. And we'll leave that for later because I got a lot for you here. I just have a lot. So the thing that you said, I love it. Okay, you said you don't give a rip. Okay, I'll paraphrase you. You don't
Yeah.
give a rip what people think. I love that. One of my favorite quotes, like seriously, in life is Les Brown, okay, this motivational speaker. And one of the things he says, and honestly, I just try to impart this to my kids and everyone else because everyone's so worried about what the world is saying about you. Yes, you want constructive criticism and you want people to tell you. You absolutely want that. However, here's the quote, okay? Other people's opinion of you are none of your business.
Yep. I love that one.
Truer words have never been said. And the honestly, the earlier people get that through their skulls, especially because I do a lot of mentoring and things like that, the better it is. And it's not because, listen, have your group around you, right? Your mental health coach, your sports coach, your mentors, whoever's around you, that's your elite group. That's who you're getting stuff. What people, when you make a post about, hey, leadership or whatever, and somebody comes on and says some random thing, or you post a picture, hey, you won with your soccer team and you're 13 years old, and people are trolling you on there. It doesn't matter. Those people have zero relevance in the course of your life. And the earlier you learn that, the better. But what I want to get back, and I just love that you said that, because honestly, that is really the key. As soon as, like, Gary Vanderchuk, another a guy that I hope to have on my show one day. We're both diehard Jet fans, by the way, and I know he wants to buy the New York Jets. And I unfortunately I torture myself by being a Jet fan. That I do not recommend that for anybody. But
I'm
we
being a
both
Leaf
are.
fan.
But anyway, Gary Vanderchuk, it's funny. One of his quotes, and this is really paraphrasing. He's like, you get really, really happy when you decide that everything that happens to you is your fault and nobody else's fault. Like, it doesn't matter what people, it's the second that, and this is another thing I tell my kids all the second that you're like, every single thing that has happened in my life is my fault. No, I'm not talking about like a hurricane came and whatever. I'm talking about like just generally where you are in life. If you take ownership, okay, and in the words of also Jocko, right? If you take ownership, extreme ownership, that literally is a recipe for just, I don't want to say happiness, like you're going to walk around smiling, but you're going to be very content with the fact that you're like, I can actually make a difference because I have a say in it. And I think that's a concept that is lost on so many people. They are so overwhelmed by the things that are happening around them, and they let everything affect them. They feel like they're at complete every day. They worry about all these things that are out of control. The more you put in your own control, which is basically everything that happens to you, the better. What do you say? What do you think about that? And I'll get to my next point.
I love that. I mean, what somebody says about you is none of your business. That, I mean, I told you I talk about a little bit about this too. I mean, I'm in addiction recovery. That's a big concept. In addiction recovery, what somebody else thinks about you is none of your business, as is doing the next right thing. So ask the question again, because I was kind of just
I
say
do,
no,
I
no,
do
give
this.
it again. No, I want it again because I there were some important things I wanted to say, and I was actually mesmerized by listening to you talk, and I kind of forgot it. So I feel
No,
stupid. There you go.
listen. I appreciate, or you could just say like my kids do. They're like blah blah blah. This guy,
No,
oh
no,
my
no, no,
god.
no.
I'm just
I'm here. I'm engaged.
I'm a quote machine with my kids, and they're just like, you get the eye roll. I mean, I have two teenage boys, and a lot of eye rolling going on, and stuff like that. No, the other one about like I was also talking about like the Gary V thing, where he's like, you want to get really happy, just understand, like the moment that you realize that everything that has happened to you is your fault, that is a way. Like, for example, right? I'm a surgeon, and I'm the CEO of our spine, of our spine. I take ownership of everything that happens. And you know what? Yes, sometimes it sucks, things that happen, but guess what? That gives me power, personal power to do something about it. I don't sit around paralyzed. Oh my God, like this is horrible. Oh, so and so, I'm going to blame that guy and I'm going to write nasty emails. No, I just have to fix it. I'll
Yeah,
worry about that stuff later. It's just a great way to live your life. And I think that you're that kind of guy because you've taken accountability for all the stuff that's happened to you. That's what I get from you. So I thought that would be a really good, thing to open the door for some of the things
so
you really want to get out.
yeah. So I mean, there's no there out there, right? I mean, it's here, right? And it's almost like radical. And then there's the whole issue of, say, radical acceptance. Like you
Yes.
are exactly where you're meant to be at any given point in your life, and if you accept that, then you're going to be okay with it. Doesn't make it happy, it doesn't make it sad, but you're okay. You have to learn to be
Yes.
okay with it, because I think the most permanent thing in life is impermanence. And so, right, if it feels like you're walking around with a rain cloud over top of you, wait, it's going to go away. And but then on the other side, when life is going, just absolutely amazing, stop and just appreciate it, because like that, it's going to change. And
Gone.
but
Yep.
as you get older, and I'm not old, but as you get older, I mean, I think I've learned to realize that just stop, just stop and appreciate the moment, or feel in the moment, or sit with it. Um, you know, I worked with some energy gurus and things like that. I like that kind of stuff. And Olaf Hartman, he was great. I met him in Malibu, and he used to say, where energy grows, or where attention goes, energy grows and
Yes.
flows,
Yep.
right? And there's the whole concept of, we are human magnets, and we are what we attract into our life is what our dominant thoughts are. And so, you know, this whole taking accountability, but not belittling myself for it. I mean, we talk about addiction and stuff, and we can go on about, get into PHPs and things like that, and are they good for you or not? But with when you have an addiction, or have had that,
Mm.
you're made to feel like a criminal. You're made to feel like a social outcast, and there's a stigma around it.
Yes.
And so I think it was really through that I got to the point where I started thinking, I don't really care what you think, because you don't know my story, and you don't know why it happened, and yeah, I'm responsible for it, but I was also responsible for getting better from it. And it's taken me a long time to actually say to people that, I developed an addiction. All right, great. Maybe that normalizes me, because when I listen to you talk about me, I don't sound relatable. Like, I was a national champion, I'm a surgeon. I'm like, holy shit, who'd want to talk to me? Like,
Who's this guy?
who you did everybody, it's you find the blueprints to life. You find your success in your failure. And it's not failure, because it's only failure if you quit, right? It's more, you're just not there yet, right? You're just not there yet. And so that gives you the ability to regroup and to challenge yourself, and to get constructive evaluation or constructive criticism. I mean, people don't like criticism. And it's like, it's helping you. I mean, I follow US politics. I shouldn't, but I do. But
You shouldn't.
right. But it was a long time. I mean, Elijah Cummings, right? What did he say? He said, don't say to yourself, why is this happening to you? Ask why it's happening for you.
Yes.
And when I heard that, I was like, okay, that's a good way to cognitively reframe things. And that's what I started doing. And once I started doing that, like you said, then all of a sudden you're empowered. You're not a victim. And then you can go, okay, well, now I can do something about this. Right? Whereas before, you're getting lashed at, and you're like going, you have no humility. Like, I have humility. Like, you don't. And you're like, I finally looked at some people and I went, look, humility it's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. And they
Love it.
want to make you feel like they want to impugn you. People want to impugn you, or oh, he's just this, oh, you're just that. And from here as a surgeon to get an addiction, and I mean, that was a long fall. And the stop was sudden, right? So I can appreciate a lot of the things you're saying, but all this, what I don't care about what people say, I really care what some people say, because those are aligned with my
Yes.
core values. And not to say people trying to guilt you. I'm Jewish. I mean, there's enough guilt in the religion, you know what I mean? But I don't believe in guilt, because guilt is what other people put on you, because you don't conform to how they think you should behave. I think more about remorse and regret, because those are aligned with me. And those are things that make me stop and go, hey, I need to be better at this. But that's what allows me now to be able to do NextGen Surgery. Because if I just went from being wrestler, surgeon, to talking about elite performance, that's a lie. Because the elite performer, it's a lifetime of performance. It's not an overnight thing. So, but when I now talk about this, and like we're talking about now, it's what enables me to talk about it now at an elite level, because it's this same platform, when it wasn't a platform, when it was my own internalized process, that got me out of it. Right. But it's also got me into abandoning it, got me into it. Right. My situation overwhelmed my abilities to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stopped, and then I didn't ask for help. Right. Because in surgery, you ask for help, boom. The culture it was looked upon as weak. Whereas now I know vulnerability, or being vulnerable, is actually courage and strength. Right. So, and when you, one last point, I'll just, to tie that one up, is when you said, or when we're talking about just being in the moment and stuff, like, if you think about the past, you can't change it. So we can sit and think about it. I mean, and you wake up at night and you're like, you can't change it. And when you think about the future, it can cause you anxiety. And it's
Yes.
really taught me to live in the moment and appreciate the moment, because you never know when that moment is going to end. I mean, as a pancreatic cancer surgeon, you wake up yellow one day and
Yep.
no
Yep.
pain, and you're like, oh shit, I should have spent more time with my kids, with that, right? Yeah.
No,
In the
it's fun. It's funny. I mean, it not actually, it's not funny, but I talk about that concept all the time. I actually just talked about that on social media recently. Being a spine surgeon and seeing how the fragility of life, and the fact that everyone's going to end up in the same place, and we don't even know. You don't know where your clock is. You don't know if you've got 10 seconds left. Like, we could just, I mean, they could, right? Or
Yep.
or if you've got 50 years left, we have no idea. And so living in the moment, some of my, you get it's interesting. You had me at energy healers and thinking about those things. I'm a very spiritual person. I talk about it openly. I've gotten into kind of some Buddhist stuff
Yep.
and meditation and these other things. And I like to talk about it. I like the concept. And actually, I think that biohacking is going to some really cool places as far as technologies now that can enhance the power of frequency and energy healing. All these things that Tesla talked about 100. I mean, it's just it's we could talk about, you know, that for a long time. But, you know, going back to, you know, people that can help us, and you had a great quote there. And one of the people that uses that quote all the time is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I'm a huge fan of. So I follow Joe Dispenza as far as meditation and the way that we can kind of center our minds and heart brain coherence, that kind of stuff. And then Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, one of the greatest books ever written, and living in that moment and not, you know, trying to come out of that moment. And the more we can spend in the moment, and a lot of what happens, you know, in getting burnt out and sometimes going down dark holes like you have is, and this is very self-evident. This isn't something you don't, you know, if you're not living in the present moment and you're always in the past or you're always in the future having anxiety about it, the more you have on your plate, the more that things are thrown at you and you're taking on too much and you're going down that path of burnout, if you think about it, you're spending almost no time in the now. It's either this or that or this or that. That's why I love doing surgery so much, because I'm in that moment and I get in those flow states. But then outside of surgery, sometimes if I'm taking on 1,000 projects at the same time, then I'm either thinking about what happened or I'm thinking about what's going to happen. And all of a sudden 8 hours passes and I don't even know what happened. It's not the good stuff, where like when you're in that flow state, like you're doing surgery or you're watching your kids, you know, game or something like that, where you're so in that precise moment. That's kind of heaven, right? That's the heaven. Everything else is kind of the hell. Tell me about how that contributed. Not do you feel like, because obviously you're a very conscientious, very spiritual guy, you talk about this fall into addiction. Do you feel like it was when you fell into that, it's because you completely came off the rails and were living not in the now at all? Everything was just stress overload, which is again being everywhere but the present moment.
Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of them. I mean, basically, you know, from sport, I developed a daily program of, you know, self-regulation, about guided meditation, motor visualization, you know, all these things. And I did it every day. And that's, you know, it helps to keep you balanced, for sure. But as things were spinning out of control, one, I didn't listen to anybody. I wasn't interested in what they had to say. Two, because of my ability to be able to compartmentalize, I could put things in boxes, and the only place I felt good was in the operating room, right? Because I can hyper focus and
You're
relax.
in the now. You're in that moment.
Yeah, and that's, you know,
Flow state. Yes.
yeah, or flow-like state, exactly. Because that's, you know, and that's what NextGen Surgery is with the elite performance, because we can measure all of those things. We measure attentional focus, your distraction control, right? We can measure, you know, how your different brain waves are, as well as your, you know, your the central and autonomic nervous system, right?
Yes.
And teach you to integrate them, because the most important thing is the awareness of that there's a problem. So I was going further and further. I was becoming further and further unaligned with who I was. And in true fashion, the more off course I got, the more resistant I was to listening to anybody that I was off course. Right. And then you end up doing things despite the negative consequences that are happening.
Of course.
Right. That's one part of the medical model of addiction. Now, look, I wasn't doing this when I was operating and stuff like that, but you know, it affects all aspects of your life. So yes, I got derailed from everything, and then I abandoned all the things. You know, they weren't working, or they were working. It's like this. You know, because you can compensate so well. You're going along, you're going along, you're going along, and then boom, you just fall off the edge. The wheels fall off. And that's sort of what happened. But that's what recognizing that is what enabled me to then come back from it. Because within the whole program, these awareness programs or energy,
Mhm.
being in the moment is the ability to, enhance both your physical and mental health. Wellness, look, when we were residents, wellness was how you ordered your steak, nothing more, right? Now, and now, it's nice. We're making a kinder surgery, or a more appealing way to go about your business in your life and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'll stop at that one for
Yeah,
now.
no, I think that that's great, and and I just love talking to people like you because it's real talk, and I got to tell you, I know numerous physicians who have struggled with, I mean, severe burnout. Like it's bad.
Yeah,
People start talking like suicidal ideation, this and that, plenty of addiction. Had a guy, I posted this thing on social media. I saw this video, just fascinating. And it's just so crazy because we are good as surgeons at compartmentalizing stuff, even though we're pretty much, I call us nut job. You gotta be a nut job to be a surgeon in a way, because it's hard. It's really you have to compartmentalize. Otherwise, it's just like the way the brain works, right? If we at the same time thought about everything that was wrong in the world, we'd literally be in an insane asylum, right? You have to be able to compartmentalize these things, to be able to do it. But again, it's the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I talk about it so much, and I showed this video, which was very moving to me when it was sent to me, and it was the last video that these men ever showed before they committed suicide. Some of them were with like their little kids and playing, and some were like, playful because they're compartmentalizing at that moment. And
yeah,
6 hours later, they shot themselves, or they took, they overdosed on medication or something like that. And it's such a problem. And the reason that I bring this up, I am like intensely passionate about talking openly about burnout, addiction, suicide awareness in
yep,
in the medical community, because people would be they'd be really shocked to know when you go around and you talk about how many physicians are actually addicted.
yeah,
It's shocking. I don't even want to really, because you depends where you quote. It is significant in males more than females, but it is significant, the number. If you look at burnout, it's off the charts. If you
yeah,
look at these other things, it's really a big problem. And we have a big problem right now in medicine, and it's a variety of factors. COVID made it worse.
yeah,
We're not going to go into all that, but what I love about what you're doing, what I really love about what you're doing is you are bringing awareness into the need for us to be able to self-regulate all of these stimuli that are coming in, because otherwise we're all going to experience burnout. Okay, I have my own methods of doing it, and because of my meditation, I work out every single day. I'm a crazy biohacker. I do all these things. It's just part of my persona, and and so that is a way that I compartmentalize. I prepare myself a certain way. I do stuff. I have the mantras. I do the deep breathing. I do all that stuff. The problem, though, is, and you know this, I talk to people. I talk to physicians all the time, and other high-level nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses. Everyone's stressed out, right? In medicine, so many people do not have the appropriate coping mechanisms because it's really hard. And then next thing you know, you're depressed, you have anxiety, you're missing work, you have suicidal ideation, you have an alcohol problem, a drug problem, whatever. There's stigma, like you mentioned before, that's associated with it, and it is a spiral. And we need to be able to openly talk about this. And honestly, this I'm telling you, these conversations that we're having right now are so important because they help people to really get it, including our colleagues, because a lot of physicians watch my stuff. And so this is almost the message for the general population, but it's also for them. So you talk a little bit about, and this will tie into kind of what you're doing, is how critical it is for you not only to have the strategy, but also to have like a check system where, like you said, when it starts, because you know how to perform at an elite level, you know how to self-regulate, but obviously something was too much and you
Yep.
stopped doing the things you needed to do that. And we need to figure out ways, how do we get people on a consistent basis? And then when they're kind of falling off before it, what are the interventions that we need to do before it gets bad, so to
Yeah.
speak?
So those are, I mean, I love everything you've said. I actually saw the that post that you put on about the men, and
Yeah.
it was moving, and it reminded me that, when we talk about burnout and addiction and things like that, and then in surgery, because I do know a few people like through the PHP and stuff who have had taken their own life. But first of all, in terms of burnout, I mean, the pandemic, yeah, made it worse. But in medicine, in surgery, like there was big studies out of the American College of Surgeons, where 25,000 members were polled, and 40% had burnout, 30% depression, of which at least 15% were a major depressive, met the criteria for a major depressive episode. 50% said they wouldn't ever recommend their children go into medicine or surgery. Then we have this culture, or historically a culture where saying you're not feeling well or whatever is a sign of weakness, because myself, I mean, Robert, like the whole naturally thriving on challenge is amazing, but naturally thriving on challenge doesn't make you immune to the effects of overwhelming unmanaged stress. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't like talking about stress because there's no stress in any situation. It's how you perceive that situation, right? So we should talk about stressors, because if
Yes.
someone's trying to bleed to death, that doesn't really affect me. I can deal with that. When something else is going on though that I might not have, that I might not want to talk about, then I'm feeling
Yes.
quite you know on edge. So I think it's you need to understand everything is mitigated by our stress response. But to finish up on the suicide thing, 11% of general surgery residents in a national study in the US have reported suicidal ideation.
Mhm.
And national studies show a third of people with suicidal ideation make a plan, and three-quarters of those will go through with it. Check in on yourself every day. Check in with your friends every day. Just, hey, how are you doing? We ask people all the time, hey, how are you? We're walking by, hey, how you doing? Mean it. Stop and mean it. Don't make it a roll off your tongue, as you're strolling by somebody. And if you do see someone who looks like they're not okay, just stop. Just stop, because I can guarantee that whatever I'm doing, unless it was running to the operating room because there was an emergency or to get to my children, nothing was probably more important or is more important than that moment for that person.
Yes.
And you never know what someone's going through. So while your intention may be okay, recognize that it may not land on them the way you meant. Now that's not always your problem, but being cognizant of that. But I think checking in with yourself and checking in with other people all the time, or asking people to check in on you is a smart thing. The whole awareness platform, self-regulation, biohacking. NextGen Surgery is really the science of mindfulness. It's the
Mm.
science of the flow state. I think we talked about it. Everybody talks about being in flow. I think we're in flow states, right? Or flow-like states.
Yes.
Because like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi really defined flow. I mean, that's a subconscious state. We are unaware. And as a surgeon, we want to be consciously aware. So they're flow-like states for sure. And it's when the challenge and your skill are aligned. or slightly out of just where you're having to be there all the time. What happens in the OR is you end up you're operating, and everybody thinks you're focused all the time, but we're actually not. I mean, if we're to be honest, because you can't, the brain. I mean, I know that we're talking to a lot of whole band of different knowledge here. So I don't need to go get into the weeds or anything like that. But how your brain buzzes is different, and people need to understand that you're not focused all the time. Like my kid's looking at his phone and he's telling me, yeah, yeah, Dad, I'm listening, I'm focused. It's like, yeah, your focus needs focus. Look, attentional focus is the key to any consistent performance. Okay, attentional focus. And that's that whole 10,000 hour rule that was really Anders Ericsson and peak,
Yes.
right? And so deliberate practice, intention, because intention leads to attention. But when we talk about attention and then stress, it's attention. You don't just have to focus. You have to know how to focus,
Mhm.
when to focus, where to focus, where to anchor that attention. Because like you said, there's so many things going around. So you're like squirrel, 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 like a dog, right? Or shiny object. And so you need to be able to know exactly what to focus on and when, and recognize that you're going to lose your focus of attention frequently, but understand that in a nanosecond, you can get it back, right? And then, so, attentional focus is the key to elite performance. And then consistent elite performance is distraction control, the ability to come back into it, and creating immersive environments to train in to be able to deal with that. And you can do that for any stressful event for somebody, right? Because so few of us have ever actually, one, learned anything about the stress response. Two, we haven't actually ever really been assessed in how we respond to stressful stimuli. Or three, we haven't been given strategies in how to best cope with them, and or how to deal with it and to be able to self-regulate. I mean, and as for biohacking, the easiest one is breathing, right?
Mhm.
Breathing affects the brain immediately. And it's all about the sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, right? Your vagus nerve. I mean, everyone's trying to hack their
Yes.
vagus. Everyone's trying to hack their vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. And I used to, like, a long time ago, we would do vagotomy. Now we do medical vagotomies, but so but it's all about that, and being able to enhance your brake, right? Sympathetic system, we're always in drive, drive,
Yep.
drive, 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 drive. And what we really need to do is learn to enhance our brake.
Yep.
And that's what biohacking is doing. We're looking at our HRV and stuff like that. And as you know, I don't know how much science you want me to get into on it,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, as much as you, but you bring up a couple of things. I just, going back to the burnout and the way I'm trying to approach it. And again, I do my own things, but now I'm really into trying to get a lot of these techniques out, not just to the general public, but also to my colleagues. And I can just tell you, many of our colleagues are extremely skeptical about even the most basic things like yoga, like the most basic stuff, or meditation. That doesn't do anything, right? You get that. But also, there are more advanced things now, like really powerful photobiomodulation, where you can actually modulate and it has a tremendous effect on the brain and this and that. But the approach that I think that we need to take for physicians is, number one, we need to get physicians and healthcare people much more involved with they themselves being healthy, both
Yep.
physically and mentally, because they're not. It's a
Yep.
huge problem. I talk about it all the time. I mean, you go to the doctor's lounge, the hottest commodity are the donuts, and it
Yep.
drives me nuts.
Yep.
These people are not well. If you are not well physically, you also cannot be well mentally, because we can get into a 5-hour discussion about how diet then affects everything, right? What's on your fork is huge for
Yep.
your mental health. That's going to dramatically contribute to burnout, right? So there's that, there's sleep, there's all these other things, and we need to do that. And then the biohacking is just on top of all that, and you combine that, that's how we really can combat burnout, but no one is teaching. I mean, people are teaching it, but they're not teaching it specific. Like, you don't join a hospital system, like, let's say you get employed and say, hey, guess what? We're going to have 10 classes for you that are going to teach you how to avoid burnout. Not the BS class. Listen, they have like the online things you do. You do a couple. That's nonsense. That does nothing.
I agree.
I mean, real classes from people that know, like people like yourself that say, listen, I went through all this stuff. Here's how we enhance performance. Here's your nutrition. Here's this, and that. I think that's real important. And I'm going to get back to the burnout thing in a second, but I want to stick to your current point, because it's really important. Mistakes absolutely happen in medicine.
For sure.
And they're going to happen because there's humans. Now, with the overlay of AI and the fact that you know we're way over the top burdened with trying not to make mistakes. And I think it's all important. Like the timeouts have changed, all this stuff has changed. And it's great because it's always like, right, we have these things called never events and things like that, right? Like you should never have a burn, you should never have this, you should never have that. But what you're onto and what I love about what you're doing, I think that people in a burnout state are much more likely to get into those distracted states when they're doing very important things like deciding what's the next step for this patient, what's the next step for this surgery, what are they doing? And so that's why it's so important to come in sound mind and body, because you're not a robot. You can't, if you're not well, you're going to make mistakes. So my question is, what percentage of medical errors, I know this is not easy, but what percentage of medical errors would you attribute to burnout and to being distracted with things?
You know, that's a great question. And I would say, so let's look at data, because people actually believe data when or maybe some people don't, but
Well, you know what? It depends. You know, there's a
on the
lot of
data.
skepticism. It's a lot of skepticism, but yeah, hit me with some data.
So, okay, my approach, my protocol, the first thing first thing I always do is I say, am I putting my commitment before my ego, or my ego before my commitment, before I do anything? And then medicine and surgery, it's primum non nocere, right? First, do no harm. The World Health Organization says that 3 million patients each year suffer a significant intraoperative complication, and 500,000 die in the immediate perioperative period. Safe surgery saves lives. They put out a big, how do we get better at what we do? Because there's a moral imperative for us to get better at what we do. In developed countries, 13% of all healthcare expenditure goes towards treating harm. That amounts to an enormous amount of money. But forget that, it's life years lost and all of that type of stuff. Now, you mentioned things, the never events, the timeout. So what's happened from all those is we have done that. We've looked at things at a systems level, right? We've created the safety checklist, the OR timeout, and all of that kind of stuff. But if we look at those, that 13%, 8.7% of that is attributable to preventable harm. That amounts to $606 billion per annum to treat preventable harm. So, 50% of complications that happen in an operating room are the direct result of the surgical intervention itself. Despite the fact that the tools and everything, the systems that we have, the technologies that we have has advanced dramatically in the past 4 decades, yet keeping people safe while using these interventions is still more difficult than using the interventions. And so 40% of surgical residents have seen a significant complication because of the surgeon's inability, or the team's inability, to manage their primary stress. So what is performance? And that brings us to then, what's performance? What does it mean to be an elite performer? And we can listen to athletes, and we can listen to anybody, and they can all tell you, but you know what? It comes down, we can measure, we can create, and that's what this is all. It's all about creating awareness. Like you said, our colleagues, they don't even believe in yoga, they don't believe in this, or they don't believe in that. But when you put on an EEG and all of the biometric data capture, well, then that's their picture in the moment, and that's why, like you said, we do these tests and all that, and they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything because they're based on self-perception and self-reporting. And that's often quite discordant to what the EEG shows and what our body metrics are showing. I mean, because I would have told you when I was in addiction, I was doing great. My body measures would have said something completely different.
Yes.
But then once you can show somebody, hey, look, this is your blueprint, then you empower them to be able to change it. So elite performance is predicated on the technical aspect, right? And that's all we do in surgery. That's what we teach, right? We teach we skill skill acquisition and execution, ultimately leading to expertise through automaticity, through neuroplasticity, right? So that we automate our skill at every single level. But all of these errors, they come in because of the things you mentioned. We're not eating properly. If we're not fueled properly, our brain's not going to function properly. If we're not sleeping, then we're fatigued. That affects our performance. So now we have technical, but in the last decade we've looked at the non-technical skills, right? Everybody calls them the soft skills. I call them power skills because they're the harder requisite skill to develop. And that's where we need to teach our colleagues. That's what we need to teach, is that these power skills are the key to elite performance, because the best skilled technician in the world in any domain will never achieve mastery if they can't self-regulate in critical moments. And what are the critical moments in every procedure? I mean, there are specific critical moments. I say, look, there's two. One's when you walk in the operating room, and the next is when you walk out. But within there are critical moments. So what I've done is now I've turned the lens back onto us. And we've talked, you talked about AI and all of these things. Yeah, we're getting better, but the human is the one variable that we actually have to look at. And it's hard to look at ourselves and say, hey, maybe we can be better. Maybe we can train people to be better. And if you look at every performance sphere in the world, everybody has a coach. Nadal has a coach. The Jets, even though they don't do well, they have a coach. Like the Leafs, same. They have a coach, though, but they have more than a coach. They have a coach. They have physiotherapists. They have nutritionists, right? They have psychologists. They have media managers. They have travel people who do everything to get a ton of data, but so that the performer can focus on what they need to do, which is to perform. Whereas with us, we manage everything on our own, and then run a clinical practice, and then try to, advance our academic career, and then try to be a good spouse, and then try to be a good parent, and we never have a coach. We never have anybody looking at us and saying, you can do better, because we all have blind spots, right? We all have areas of weakness where we're unaware of. And so through, these types of, first thing we need to do, step one, what's needed to succeed? Let's look at what step two, do I have what's needed to succeed? Step three, coaching and training. So elite performance, technical skill, self-regulation, right? Awareness and control of the body, as well as cognition and emotion, so that we can create this calmness of mind and integrate the central and autonomic nervous system for that, the moment to critical moment, biobehavior, cognitive, affective ability to perform. And then when you're tired and all of those kinds of things, we don't communicate with each other well. Right? And so if you can train people at a foundational level in these things, like with the brainwave speeds, you can then change the top here. How do you communicate? How do you make decisions? Are you able to download information and still do your technique, right? I mean, that's the big thing, because we automate our skill, but then if we're not able to take in information and we're becoming overwhelmed, and then we're not communicating, then we're making poor decisions, it doesn't matter how much AI we have. It doesn't matter how much AI there is, right? So another thing I found, and what we're doing, is let's look at what are the distractors that lead to these problems, this harm that we create, this preventable harm. And there are a ton of things that happen in the operating room that we don't train for. Noise. There's about 138 auditory distractions per case. that draws you away, that draws your focus of attention away. 67% of cases have cognitive distractions that pulls you away. So if you already are at a level where your your cognitive engagement is maxed because you haven't done any training in how to, for lack of a better way to describe it for everybody, for just really to how to tune yourself into a sweet spot, that you don't have this ability to be flexible or adaptable, right? Because you're humming along right at your peak, and no, you're not doing things like breathing to affect your vagus nerve and all of that kind of stuff. Slow your heart rate down, slow down your thinking, and all of that kind of stuff. That's when we're getting into those troubles. So we need to put all these things together and then be able to teach you how to use it. Those are sort of the numbers, that we talked about before. They're staggering though, and we can all benefit. We can all benefit from it. What I want to do is get this into start in the educational level, right in first year of medical school, right? So that as we're learning our knowledge and the knowledge base that we need, as we're learning the technical base that we need, we're learning how to manage how we control ourselves, how we interact with our immediate universe or the immediate area around us, and then with others.
I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, you really laid out the case for why this stuff is so important. And I'll tell you, you hit it right on about residents seeing it in other people. And as I was doing my training, both in medical school and residency, I actually saw some things that went wrong surgically. And I will tell you that the surgeon was definitely unable to regulate themselves properly in the moment. And that leads to worsening things. And that's why you've got to be able to bring yourself back to that present moment. And you've got to be able then to make those decisions. So if you lose self-regulation, then you can forget your checklist. You forget the next steps, right? You're the captain of the ship. No one's coming to save you. Like literally, people have to understand, like literally, unless you have a colleague nearby or something, no one's coming to save you. And those critical decisions that you make in that next 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, the last thing you're going to do is you can't panic. You can't be thinking about other things. You have to bring it back. And that's where meditations really help me, breath work, the ability, because right, when you meditate, right, it's the elephant and the rider, right? You're always, you get distracted. You're sitting there and you're trying to focus on the breath. And then you start thinking about, right, why were all the eggs gone in the doctor's lounge this morning? I'm so irritated because I forgot to bring, my food. And then you have to bring yourself consistently back to the breath. Having practices like that, I mean, just really simple stuff. I mean, this is way better, like doing it with EEGs and biofeedback and everything, but just simply being able to regulate yourself in that moment. And I know, like, and that to me, what's between your ears, as far as those things, really do differentiate great surgeons from then good surgeons, from then very average surgeons that have higher complication rates and have other things going on. And a lot of it is because when things go wrong, they don't know, they even if they know what to do, they lose the ability in that moment to do it in a coherent, stepwise fashion. And I've seen it, and it unravels quickly. And it can go, it can go bad. And we if you want to, talk about that a little bit, but a couple other things that I want to bring up. And sometimes we're jumping around because, I get excited by talking to guys like you, because you get it. You understand this is really critical. But not only will it help them in the operating room, the stuff you're doing, and if we start it early on in med school and in training, it'll also help them to avoid burnout. Because
Absolutely.
again, burnout is like when you're just all over the place. It feels like it's completely overwhelming, and you can't do that. But before a couple other things that I just have to get out. Number one, my spiel to my patients is, and you hit right on. It's like you're kind of taking the thoughts out of my head. This is exactly what I say to all my patients when I give them all the risks and benefits of surgery. So I do that. And then my next line, I say it almost every time: I say my primary job as a surgeon in the operating room is to keep you safe. Everything
Absolutely.
else we can deal with. If we have to abort, if we have to do something, if we just say, you know what, we can only do 1/3 of the surgery because you're hypotensive or you're having some cardiac thing, that's fine. But if we do things that then make you not, safe. So everything, you're absolutely, when we're in that operating room, it's everything is safety first. It's not like I got to finish this whole thing, or I'm going to do this new thing and it's not working and I'm not going to change because my ego is getting in the way, or I'm just such a fixed mindset in this silo. So thank you for bringing that stuff up. The one thing that I want to bring up, it's not really off top. You talked about 13% of things being harm. One of the things, now that is when we talk about, maybe very specific, like surgical things or even medical things. One of the things that I talk about in my book that's coming out, and this chapter's already done, and I'm really passionate about it, is I feel like, and I know I'm right, I don't know to what level I'm right. I can't give a percentage, but the fact that right now in medicine, just like we are very siloed with not understanding these power skills, I feel we are also siloed in this Western medical tradition and not understanding that there are so many holistic, natural, adjuvant ways of making people better. So, for example, counseling people on nutrition to reverse their diabetes, whether it be through intermittent fasting or veganism or carnivore diet. I mean, they all can reverse diabetes, all of them. Like proven. This is proven science. Or counseling patients that have anxiety and depression on changing their diets, getting their processed foods out, getting rid of the toxins, getting rid of the seed oils, all these other things. And so I will actually not argue with you, but I just want to add to what you said. I feel like we as physicians, by not opening our minds to these very important concepts, which I'll call them all power skills, because I think it's a power skill to know all these other things and to preach it. I think a lot of times we are doing more harm with what we are recommending to people way outside of that. I'm not talking about like big complications, like you cut a vessel and the patient died. Not that stuff. I mean, people come in and we put them on diabetes medicines and they're just barely diabetic. They're pre-diabetic, and next thing you know, they're on boatloads of insulin because we've created the insulin resistance, and we've never counseled them on a whole host of diets that can fix their problem. When I say that, I don't mean it lightly, and I'm not giving medical advice, obviously, on this program. Check with your provider, but I can tell you, most diabetes is absolutely reversible with diet. And we're not teaching that. So I feel like as a medical community, and it all ties in, because you're trying to teach things that are outside of how we think. We don't need that. I got this. I got it on my own. It's the same hubris and whatever's going on that tells it, oh, no, this is what, no, I learned this in pharmacology. I'm going to give you this prescription because this molecule is going to change this thing, and then it's going to help you with your cholesterol. Well, there's about a million other ways that we can approach this problem, which doesn't have the side effects that we're promoting. So sorry to go off on a rant, but medical harm goes way beyond what can happen to me or my colleagues. Like when we're physically doing something, it goes to how we're speaking to patients, how we're understanding them, how we're listening to them, and really not understanding that medicine is not like this big. I mean, true, total, whole body, holistic medicine, which I know you're all into, is this big.
Yeah.
Western medicine is a fraction
Yeah.
of how we can heal ourselves and our bodies. What say you to that? How bad do you think that problem is? Because that's something that makes me I'm really calm about it at this moment. This is me being calm.
I echo what you say. I mean, people will just inherently trust what their physician says. And oftentimes it's an uneducated opinion. It's an opinion that's predicated on outdated knowledge, which is no longer knowledge. And the this need to just put people on it, here's a pill, here's Here, take this, take this, take this, because anything meaningful and worthwhile to make change takes time, and people don't want that. They want a quick fix, right? I mean, that's, I have my phones here, boom, whatever the hell I want, I can, boom, I got it. That's not how your body works, though. And so I agree with you. I mean, we need to move to a more integrated healthcare
Yes.
system, right? Embrace, we need to embrace Eastern philosophies, right? To
Mhm.
me, they're all over my arms, but we need to embrace that because, just because we didn't learn something in Western medicals, Westernized medical system doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, look at just plant and plant-based diets. Go back 2,500 years. We didn't have the medications we have now, and
Yeah.
yet people were being treated for things, right? I mean, chemotherapeutic agents, so many of them are made from plants. When we look at the diet that we eat, in North America, we eat a high fat, low fiber diet, and we suffer from colorectal cancer as a result of that.
Mhm.
In Asia, um, Japan, they don't have colon cancer is not a big
Yeah.
issue for them, right? Because of the diet they eat, but they have gastric cancer at a higher rate because of the nitrites. So
Yes.
you need to be able to look at the diet and go, okay, we need to manage and mitigate things because when a Japanese family moves then to North America, the next generation who adopts the North American diet picks up the same risks and development of colon cancer
Right.
that they never had before. And so how we're fueling ourselves is huge. How we're managing our emotional states around
Mhm.
that matter, and how we address or actually don't address real problems because they seem overwhelming and too difficult, and just want to give somebody, as you say, and as like a medication. We every medication we have, there's no it doesn't have a toxic profile. It all has effects. And some of the effects are good and some of them are bad. Some of them we want and some of them we don't. And when we give people a medication, you need to think about how it's affecting everything else within
Right.
them as
Yes.
well. I mean, so the pre-diabetic, like you say, who's put on medication for that, and all of a sudden we downregulate them, or
Yeah.
we're creating significantly more problems. So, but we can change all this by being able by just being able to show people that they can change things within themselves in the moment,
Yes.
and the ability to be able to do that, and the awareness to be able to do that is not something that we really have access to. And that's the big problem, right? Is creating this access to it. I mean, we can sit and talk about it for 2 hours. I mean, maybe I'll make some good points. Maybe I'll make some points that aren't going to register with people. You know what I mean? Hopefully, there's things that that people can take away from some of this. But the most important thing is that we have the ability to pretty much change an awful lot of what's happening in our mind and body in any given moment. I mean, I can't, if you have a predisposition to developing colon cancer, I'm not going to be able to change that. But within the moment, we
Yep.
have the ability, through changing our thought, through changing our breathing, through learning skills that we can apply to life, right? And that's really a critical thing, because we train here, but how do we train? Real reality is
Mhm.
what we do in our simulation, what we do in XR, what we do in the operating, what we do with metacognitive or cognitive training. But if you don't have a transfer skill, because we can't meditate in the operating room, okay, you can't just stop and
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
You need a little self-regulation strategy that's imperceptible, that allows you to take what you learn in life and training and be able to transfer it from moment to environment. I mean, first you learn a skill, then you learn that skill under stress, then you learn to do that with when anything's happening, and then you need to be able to take that and put it anywhere and have the ability to integrate it into a moment.
No, I mean, I think that's good. I think the way that I talk about it when people just ask me, how are you able to go at such an insane pace for so many years, especially, surgically, and now I'm doing other things. And on top of it, I love it. I mean, I'm so passionate about it. I just there's not enough hours in the day for me to do what I want to do. That's how much I love doing what I'm doing. But I think about it as a point, right? So your ability, when you are dialed in, let's just say you feel great, you had a great night's sleep, everything, the sun is shining, your kids are acting normal, everything's going well, right? If you just take your finger, you can stare at your finger for like a long period of time. You just like undistracted, like things could be exploding in the back. You can just look at your finger. But with each layer of things that are going wrong, you're irritable, you have something else happen, you have something going on with your family, or you're ill, right? You have an illness. We get sick too. Or you've just had your own surgery and you're actually in pain, but you're still practicing medicine while you're in pain. So then it's a lot harder, right? Because you're over here, you're just like looking away from your finger. It's just, you got to bring it back in. And so I always think about it that way. So even on days, I think that as far as the self-regulation, and I haven't done it, I mean, I do a lot of biohacking, I do this other stuff, but it's not like I put on quantitative EEGs every day and just try to, and I just don't do that. But I've learned over my career to always bring it back. So if I'm not feeling incredible, or it's it's late in the day and something comes up I wasn't expecting, and I'm expected to be my best, because we're always expected to be our best as surgeons. Just having that ability to, you got to bring it back to that finger. You have to be able to focus, and I'm cognizant of that. And I literally will go, I mean, I've had times where I've just walked away or gone outside and done deep breathing, because I know I have to be sharp in that moment, and it helps so much. You are doing it on a much more real scientific level, and that's the beauty about biofeedback, is you can see it. You can say, oh my God, I can't bring it back to my finger. I'm over here. I
Yeah.
need to be in here. And I think that what you're doing, with this company, I'm really excited to see where it goes. It's really so necessary. And going back, I wish I had these technologies, and somebody like yourself coming in saying, hey, this is period 8. This is what we're going to do. In period 8, we're gonna get you back to, we're gonna get you focused. We're gonna get you centered.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. I mean, look, they're difficult processes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we can talk about it and go into depth with it, but you need to be, I mean, as you're doing brain, I call it brain tuning,
Yes.
not brain training, right? Because we're not going to train somebody to be who they're not. We're going to assess somebody, and then through their natural state at rest and at stress and at recovery, we can then create a program to tune them into their
Mm.
sweet spot. But what you need to do, and it takes time, I mean, in order to create these new skills, behaviors, or habits, I mean, it takes about 66 days, right, to lay down a new neural network. Now, we can speed that up, right, when we're doing our motor imagery or any
Mm.
visualization, right? Because the body can't tell the difference between whether we're doing something
Yes.
or whether we are imagining that we're doing it, right? That's all that intention and deliberate practice, right? And when you get really good, so what I did when I was learning surgery, I would start every evening, doing my motor imagery, and I would take just the needle driver and just put the needle in 2/3, 1/3, 90 degrees 100 times. That's what I'm visualizing. Then it was just cocking my wrist, cocking my wrist, cocking my wrist, and then breaking it down smaller, smaller,
Yep.
smaller
Yep. Yep.
parts, and then linking it all back together. That's how you're good. That's one key aspect, because you then develop your skill at this level. You do it the same all the time, regardless of
Yep.
your environment. And then you're doing it here all the time. That's how elite performers are
Mm.
always there. The Michael Phelps, the Simone Biles that you mentioned, right? The Michael Jordan and the Kobe Bryants. Um, but then we have to learn to be able to manage how we feel in those moments as well. And we're not always going to feel great in those moments. And we need to understand that, right? So we need to then be able to train. Like when we say we're fatigued, or we're hungry and we're irritable, we still need to be able to perform them. So we need strategies. We need to learn how to actually be able to perform regardless of how we feel when we get into this, great state when you're staring at your finger and it's no problem, but then all of a sudden these other things are
Yeah.
happening. right? Like you say, but we can train for that. And, we don't always need to be wearing EEGs and biometric data. Otherwise, it's not reasonable. But what we can do is, we can put it on, we can assess you, give you a training program, and then reassess, and we can and that's part of that whole "how am I doing today?" Checking in with ourselves, because ultimately you get to a point where you don't need to have an EEG on and all of that kind of stuff, because
Yep.
you have integrated your, how you think, how you feel, and how you perform, right? I mean, in an instant. But what this stuff is doing is, people talk about like data in action. I call it actionable data, right? It's what I'm calling the Internet of Surgical Things, right? And the Internet of Surgical Things is really allowing us to embrace and use all the technologies that we now have available to us, right? Through immersive and interactive environments, so that, that when we are doing our training, it's not just mental training, right? Because we have a body. You got to train your mind to respond to your body, and your body to respond to the mind all the time. And, when we're talking about the next 30 seconds and the next 30 seconds and the next 30 seconds, I break surgery or anything that I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a series of small steps done technically perfect, and perfection's real. It does exist, despite what people say. It's you can achieve it, and it's done in the correct sequence. But each step has its own beginning and its own end, its own focus. And so, if we create then our life into smaller aliquots, we can manage every situation then, because every situation is a unit unto itself. It's a focus moment, and then a refocus, and then a focus moment. And that enables us to, move such that the operation or whatever we're doing, it flows, but it's not rushed, right? It's this slow down to speed up, right?
Yes.
We're removing unwanted movement. We're creating an economy of motion, right? What do they say? They say something isn't perfect when there's no more that can be added to it, but when there's nothing else that can be taken away, right? Because it's about simplicity of things like that.
Yeah, and that, it's funny because that is the whole thing about the power of now. Like this moment, right now, if you read Eckhart Tolle's book, right, he's sitting there on the park bench, and all of a sudden he is overwhelmed with like joy and all that. It's just that book is it's really a life changer. I mean, people, I'm really a big Eckhart Tolle fan. But that moment, because everything's perfect, right? You look around, you're like, oh my, the trees are perfect, the clouds are perfect, everything's perfect. And it's just one of those things that it's like, even though a lot of us get into very difficult situations in life and whatever, listen, I know I've been there, and I know that people watching this, that people have all kinds of stuff going on. But the truth is that present moment, it's so beautiful, because that's it. That's all we have. That's that little slice of heaven that you can have if you stay in there. It's just amazing thing. And you are really bringing people back to them. And we are combining and I love it, because your spirit, so we can have this really deep conversation. I tell you, so some of my colleagues, like, I can't have this conversation because they're like, what is this guy talking? Like, what are you talking about? And so that's why this is good. But what I really want to comment on, which is, and I'm really, I mean, kudos to you for what I mean, you are on it. I'm telling you're on it. And the reason is this: if we did this type of training, and I know, your tagline there is elite surgeon performance, but if we did this type of kind of biofeedback, self-regulating, all these things in training, for doctors across the board, for nurses across the board, all these people, because it is all those things are. I mean, they're all in their way. They're all stressful. Obviously, as surgeons, it's just captain of the ship is a tough place to be. But everybody's got high stress. If these techniques, man, this would be so incredible to really, if this becomes pervasive, I think we can really bring down the rate of burnout in specialties that have such a horrible burnout rate now. And you mentioned before, when they ask physicians now, how many people would recommend this, to the next generation, and it's really bad. And I asked a couple of my guests that before, like, how can we fix that? Well, one, we can fix it by putting people in situations where they're not so burned out. Because I can tell you, even people, I know people that have gotten severely burned out that absolutely, like, legitimately love being surgeons. They love what they do. They love the technical aspects. They like taking care of people, but sometimes it's just too much for them to handle because they don't have the right tools and mechanisms to handle. Listen, there's some stuff, no matter what tools you have, if you take on too much, we're human, right? So you at something's going to break you at some point. But I think that the kind of the things that you're teaching can absolutely be extrapolated and help us as we obviously one of the biggest thing that I'm focused on is really getting people healthy, eating a good nutrition, thinking about biohacking, because I think that's going to help the burnout problem dramatically. But this more advanced scientific way of looking at how we self-regulate is a game changer to me, because it just takes a couple, right? And the other concept, and I'm sorry, I know you want to you chime in, but the other concept that lay people listening to this, and I know any healthcare workers, because they see us, they see what we have to deal with. Unlike other things, like sometimes it actually is similar. I give two examples. As a surgeon, when things go wrong, if you have a complication or somebody, like you get a call, yeah, your patient's on the floor, they had a heart attack, and they're in critical condition, I don't think they're going to make it. Well, guess what? You might have 7 more surgeries to do. I need to self-regulate myself. I can't, these are 7 other human souls that I have to interact with. So I can't let that go. No different than, when you're dealing with a sick family member, but yet you have 3 other children that you have to deal with. You can't just say, well, I guess you guys are on your own. I know you're, 3, 7, and 9. I guess you're just going to have to be on your own for the next 7 months because I have to deal with my sick mom or whatever.
Yeah.
And so these concepts are so critical. So I really think that what you're doing is a game changer in how we think about keeping people out of the burnout phase.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, it's, burnout, flame out burnout, mental health concerns, we're talking about it from us, from our perspective, from the
Yeah.
surgeon perspective. But, I mean, pre-pandemic, it cost healthcare systems probably $17 billion annually to treat burnout related issues in physicians. But let's take this platform. I mean, it's a performance platform, is it? No, it's an awareness platform. It's awareness of the mind body and how we're moving, how we integrate, and then how we interact with everything around us. So we can extrapolate it out though to, given there's a wide swath of people listening. I mean, it's performance, but then the exact same principles are there for physical and mental health. The exact same training that the surgeon's going to do or the nurse is going to do that's going to enhance their performance, or that the Olympic athlete is going to do, or the performing artist, or whatever. It's the same. Then we take the patient. Like, let's look at the patient. I mean, by applying this, I mean, I'm sure you do this. I mean, you take what you do to yourself and you give good advice to people, like prehabilitation, right? And allowing people to get optimized prior to coming to any intervention, right? I mean, so what do we see? What happens with complications? Well, there's operative factors, there's technical factors, there's patient factors,
Mhm.
right? And then the complications are early and late. So if you take something as simple as weight loss and bringing someone's weight down to a certain level prior to their operation, that is going to help. You mentioned insulin dysregulation. Well, after an operation, we have what's known as the diabetes of trauma, right? I mean, we turn down our insulin receptors. Everybody will become hyperglycemic in the immediate post-operative
Mhm.
period. Leave it, they'll come back. But losing weight, stopping smoking, right, and allowing
Yes.
the cilia to be able to regain function so that you can expectorate and not end up with atelectasis and fever post-op and things like that. So I mean, this program is really, I mean, it has 3 arms, and it can really span the whole spectrum of healthcare, where we rehabilitation, physician health and
Mm.
wellness, and performance for everybody. But more so than that, it has direct applicability just in general to our mental and physical health. And if we're, you know, as we said earlier, this is your universe, and how you treat it, it's how it's gonna pay you back. You know, I should speak from I, as I was going through medicine and all of that and surgery, you're always taking on more and more and more and more and more and more, right? Because we love that external
Yeah.
validation, especially when you grow up not thinking that you're good enough. So you want to hear it. It's like, it's nice to hear it. But we need to be thinking of things more than that. We need, I would say, 20% of our activities should provide us internal satisfaction. Forget external validation, internal satisfaction. What aligns with who I am as a
Mm.
person? That's going to help manage and mitigate the number of people who end up getting burnout, because we're then doing things because they matter to us. There's parts of medicine that we have to do that I hated, like charting and dictating. It's important, critically important, but it's not being in the operating room and doing what we do well, right? But at the same time, there's also, for me, I think there's a time to realize that, Stefano, maybe eight's too many. Maybe you shouldn't do eight, right? Yeah, you're the rock star, doing it, but maybe that's not going to help you the next day, because you prepare for you
Hmm.
prepare to perform the day before, the week before, right? And so that's these cycles that we get into, that you're talking about nutrition. Exactly, it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's absolutely everything that we do that enables you to perform daily, over 6 to 7, 8 hours a day, over days and weeks and months.
No, I mean, I think it's great. Just going back to, I like that it's the ebbs and that is something I have learned personally, is that I try to structure like really intense times with then very light times. So, for example, like having a very long day in surgery where I really have to prepare myself, and I'll go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, I do all this stuff to prepare myself for this approach, and I love it. I love those because it's so challenging, but I also like the challenge of preparing myself. No different than if I was going to prepare myself to run a marathon. But then you cannot stay at that peak state forever, because it's going to so you have to my good friend Dan Zeman, he's an exercise physiologist. He worked with Greg LeMond, and he worked with the Timberwolves and all these other, and it's very interesting how important it is to cycle to prevent burnout. So you want to peak at the right time, and that's not just like on a yearly, like on a calendar. It's even in during the week. And so I try to, like, for example, like this next week after we're filming this podcast, I kind of have I gave myself a light clinic day the first time, and then I go into pretty intense couple surgery days, and then I come down with a kind of a medium and then a day off, because I know how I need to cycle myself and then just make sure that I'm doing the exercise, the biohacking all the time, making sure that my nutrition, because when you get burnt out, right, that's when all of a sudden, even if you're Mr., you're preaching wellness, all of a sudden that bag of Doritos, boy, there's seed oils in there, it's bad for you, but your brain is like, oh my God, I need my fix right now. So then so it's very important, for burnout to do that. But the other point I wanted to make, as you were talking, and I was thinking how critical it is. And I love the neurofeedback, this awareness model that you're bringing out. It's so important. And I hope I hope this really takes off and almost becomes mandatory in training in all professional, including law school and all these other places where people get, really burnt out, is when you are in a state where you can't really self-regulate. Listen, issues are going to come up all the time. You don't know what's going to happen. Like in surgery, stuff happens. All of a sudden, the
Absolutely.
anesthesiologist says, oh my God, the blood pressure is 60. Or we can't get, like, something's, and so you got to go. A lot of complication. You might have one complication, but depending on how you can self-regulate yourself and really make the right decisions, then it's that decision tree, right? Yes, no, this is happening. Yes, no, this is happening. Yes, no. It is the difference sometimes between life and death, but sometimes between getting into the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth complication. And that happens with medical patients all the time, right? Hey, we missed your pneumonia. Now you have pneumonia, but now we're not transferring you to the ICU. And it was very clear that you needed to be in the ICU. And now you have this, and now you have secondary inflammatory cascade happening, but yet we didn't pick that up but now you have ARDS, and now you're dead.
Yeah.
So it is, and this happens. I mean, I'm like, I just, we have to talk about it openly. And you talk about, there's statistics out there, you quoted them.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
how you deal with that, not procrastinating, not saying anything, right? When there is a question, there is no question. If you have that feeling, you know this as a surgeon, when you have that feeling something is not quite right with that patient, you got to act. You
yeah.
just can't be like, it'll be fine, be okay,
Yeah.
right? And
Sometimes the
that
most
is part
conservative
of it.
thing to do is to intervene.
Yes.
And the worst complication or the worst mistake to make is the second one. Always, right? I mean, it's recognizing that there's a mistake. I mean, I talk about the wheel of excellence, right? I mean, the heart of human excellence is like grit, willpower, commitment, mindfulness, and self-efficacy. You know, that determines sort of how we're going to be, how we feel about performance or what we're doing. But then you have all these other things that we talked about, like distraction control and focus of attention, your mental and physical health, your preparedness, how you prepare, and then taking that, and then you have constructive evaluation. And we're always moving between these things. It's like it's a wheel and the spokes. So it's like a cybernetic system,
Mhm.
right? So one thing affects the next, affects the next, affects the next, affects the next. And um, you need to be able to recognize that recognize the complexity of everything that is around us. It's not one thing. It's not linear or vertical, right? You need to be. It's quite tangential. Like you need to be bringing in things from everywhere to create the perfect environment. And you know, I mentioned it, perfection, and it's. I think we need to strive to be better, right?
Absolutely.
I think we've
Absolutely.
become complacent in medicine. I think I think that what is our paradigm now? It's competency. It's competence by design. I don't want my surgeon to be competent. I want my surgeon to be excellent, right?
Bingo.
And so what we're trying to do is, and that's not a dig, but this is to go from competence to excellence,
Hmm.
right? And you know, the way medical school or how we train has changed, right? I mean, we trained in a time when it was based on volume and exposure, and all of a sudden now you have, this competency era where you have entrustable professional activities and you have competencies and you have experiences that you have to tick in boxes.
Yes, you
That's
are.
not how
It's
that's not
awful.
how life works.
No.
And so we need to find novel ways to be able to engage in what it is we're doing, to be able to engage in how we're speaking to people. And so these are where, I mean, I'm big obviously into XR, into the immersive
Yes.
environment, right? Immersive and interactive environments. It's only one piece. I mean, we need to look at everything, all the different ways that we can engage ourselves and engage patients. You know, empower people to help themselves, kind of, so to
Yeah,
speak.
no, I think it's good. And I think it brings up, I mean, this has been really a tour de force, and we definitely probably going to have a part two of this, because there's so many, I mean, there's just so much that we can talk about that's going on. And really, what I really what I really like about this conversation is that, how you talked about earlier on, that you kind of got to medicine a different way. You kind of you have this ability that I feel like that we're not. It's so important to me to get people in the medical community that can see in between the space, like what's happening in between. So there's this concept, for example, that is big. They talk about it all the time in astronomy. Okay, there's this dark matter, right? It's very dense. It's whatever. No one knows what the hell it is, including all the usual, brilliant people out there. But it's like it's those space in between. It's like it's quantum theory. I love like quantum mechanics, quantum theory. I'm trying to pick some of it up now. I understand the concepts, the math. I'm certainly not there. I'd have to really relearn all my calculus from way back in the day. But seeing the spaces in between, and what you've been able to do, and why I love to pick people's brains like yourself, is that you're able to see kind of what is missing. And that's the brilliant thing. And that's what I want to get to, kind of the last thing. And we can weave it in however you want. One of my pet peeves, and I've talked about this. I think I did a post about this. I don't know, or a video or something. I don't even remember, but I talk about it all the time. This checking the boxes thing to get into the medical arts. I just, like, right now, like, my heart rate just went up a couple beats just talking about that, because I want to have a very diverse group of people that are not just checking the boxes, but they are actually able to see what's missing, not just go on the traditional teachings, but to question those teachings, to just say, you know what, but why not that? Oh, why are you treating this way? But what about, why are we not, how come, well, we considered acupuncture and mixing it with photobiomodulation to treat the same problem that you're, and we're not, I feel like we're not getting those people as much into as when me and you were accepted into med school, because it was different criteria to get in. And a lot of it, I don't see the innovators. And I talk to young people all the time, and they're very fixed, and a lot of our colleagues too, but they're fixed on, this is the way I was taught and this is what I do. But that ability to see that in between. So my question to you, I love long convoluted questions, because it makes it as hard for the guests as possible to answer them. But do you think that we should be adding some type of evaluation into making the decision to bring people into these spaces, as far as their ability to self-regulate? And if they can't self-regulate well, because obviously that puts them in a space, I can already see the comments below. I'm not trying. Everyone thinks everything is prejudicial in this day and age. It's not prejudicial. Do you want your doctor to be great and be able to self-manage themselves, or do you want your doctor to be burnt out and in a panic about everything? So hear me out. So is there a way that we can use some of these technologies to figure out who needs more work here, instead of more volunteer work at the hospital, or another A in some class that does not translate to how they react when their patient is bleeding out and there's one person in the room that can do something about it? Should we be really digging into this and adding it as part of the evaluation?
So you really put me on the spot with that one, because it's a double-edged sword. There's duality in everything, and I'm going to give a very politically correct answer, perhaps, and then I'm going to say what I think.
All right, that's what the show's all about. Sure.
We can do that in sports really easily, right? Like, we can put EEGs and biometric data capture on, and you can look at the 14-year-old or the 13-year-old who can throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but is he going to be able to control his anger, or is he going to be able to get rid of certain biobehavioral issues? If we tried to do that in medicine, surgery, everyone would scream bloody murder, right? They'd say equality of opportunity, equality of outcome, right? All that kind of stuff. I think we should, because we have the ability to see who is going to be able to be challenged at the next level of difficulties, right? We can tell if, through looking at the EEG, you can see how someone is downloading information. You can see if their makeup is such that they're a space cadet versus someone dialed in. And I don't say that meanly, because just if we go to the brainwave speeds, and I'll make it really kind of simple, but the brainwave speed alpha, okay, everybody can get alpha when they close their eyes and stuff like that. It's calm, right? But when we look at things, we can really narrow down to exactly who you are, pinpoint like 1 hertz, right? Not taking how we look at things traditionally, like these big, we look at things in a band wave, right? So alpha is the ability to remain calm, and there's some performance in there. So, but if we look at you 1 hertz, 1 hertz, 1 hertz, 1 hertz, we can tell if in practice, Rich is getting in trouble because he's like looking off into left field, and it's because I'm wired that way. I'm wired like that. This is boring. Make it interesting for me, and you'll see. So in practice, I look like I'm out in left field, but then you get in competition, and you're there, right? Because that's how your brain
Mhm.
buzzes. I'll explain what that means in a second. 12 hertz person, that's the other end of this alpha spectrum. In practice, you're watching them and you're going, Heisman, right? 100% Heisman. Put them in the game and they crumple, right? So if we know that about somebody going in, we can then create a program for them, not to say they shouldn't come in, but to say, hey, we can create something precision
Yes.
specifically for you, right? We're looking at, we're in this era where we have digital precision medicine. Everybody's digital precision
Yeah.
medicine. Everybody's
Yeah.
looking at their looking at their device and interacting with it and doing something to make themselves better. And I look at it to say, let's turn the device back this way, make us better. That's going to affect somebody else. We can train into those different spaces. So the 12 hertz person, that's the number of packets of information that you're taking down at any given moment versus the 8. So when I'm in a competition, I'm managing 8 no problem. I'm going to learn, I can do that. And the 12 is not going to bother me. But in practice, I'm like it's not stimulating enough, and it's the other way around. So
Mhm.
I think if I'm getting what you want,
Hmm.
so the political correct is people will get upset, but yes, we should do it because we want our. I would want to know if I wasn't going to be a good surgeon. Like everyone sits and goes, oh, but what if they really want to be a surgeon? Okay, I wanted to be 6'2". It's not happening. Like, right? We're in this situation where people are told they can be whatever they want to be. You can be whatever you want to be. And then all of a sudden they go out and they realize in the world they can't be whatever they want to be. And then we have all these issues. So yeah, I think I'm all I would like to try it to assess it. And if you're seeing comments on the bottom that say this guy's nuts, no. Look, this isn't Neuralink. We're not implanting anything into people's brain.
Right.
This
Right.
is like so when we're talking about neurotechnology, and we really haven't hit on those words, but we're talking about neurotechnology and brain computer interfaces here. But we're not putting things into people's brains. We're also not reading people's thoughts, right? Like for the tin
Yeah.
hat people, like we're not reading your thoughts and things like that. So I think that to be able to do this, individuals will then be happier because they'll be able to choose things that they know they're going to excel at. I mean, here in Canada, there's the RBC program for athletes, and they bring these high performance athletes to the RBC training center, and someone may have been a hockey player and a rugby player their whole life, and they put them through this entire series of testing, and all of a sudden they realize they're like, you are suited for bobsled, and they transition them completely to bobsled, and then they become Olympic champions. Hockey all their life, and boom, they're playing rugby now. So if we know to assess means you're no longer guessing. And in at anything you're going to be able to do. And we can then help people and help ourselves create an environment where we're going to thrive. I mean, my bottom
Yeah.
answer is we should do it.
Listen, that's a great answer. Brilliant. And here's the thing. I'm not trying to block anyone from doing anything. And you know what? If your heart's in it, if you want to try to do whatever do whatever you want. Okay. I'd love at age 50, to try out for the Timberwolves, but I probably am not going to make it. I don't think. But I think number one, if I think it's going to save people. We have a limited number of spots and we have a physician shortage.
Yep.
And so wouldn't it be in everyone's best interest, society, the medical community, but also for those individuals to know if they elected to go down a path which is fraught with massive amounts of stress? Because I can tell you as a surgeon myself, you as a surgeon, the amount of stress that you have to be able to handle and self-regulate yourself, I just wish sometimes people that don't know about what we do or don't whatever, just make they just do not understand until you're there. When something happens to a human being, a patient, it is devastating to us as doctors. And just having that all the time, but also knowing that the next second, the next millisecond of something that you're doing can ruin somebody's life, and have that as that's every day, all day.
Yep.
Every day, all day.
Yep.
If you are not able to tolerate that level of constant stimulation and having to manage that, and we can pick that up before, it's nothing to do with being prejudicial. And again, they'll probably they're going to throw darts at you and me, whatever. I'm not suggesting we implement this tomorrow. It's something that can be looked at, but I think that for some of my colleagues now, I have colleagues, surgical colleagues that are in practice for 2 years. Okay, I recently had a conversation with a surgeon, no names mentioned. It's not like a person that's been on my pod. This is just somebody I just talked to, 2 years, and all they wanted to talk about was every single strategy to get out of the profession, because they're like, I can't deal with this. This is awful. Like, this is the burdensome, the administration, the paperwork, and then I have to do surgery, and then I have to deal with family. They're like, it's not for me. That ain't good. So if this is somebody that's considering leaving medicine after 2 years in practice,
Yeah.
the medical profession, that's not good. He's miserable. It's not good for the medical profession. It's not good for potentially for patients that they're dealing with. And so, listen, when you don't go to become a Navy SEAL without having a high amount of They don't say, oh, you want to be a Navy SEAL? That's cool. You know what? You don't have to do the water thing. You don't worry about it. Even if you ring the bell, just come back tomorrow, get a great night's sleep. I'm just come on back. We'll get you going. So I just, for those of you that think that we're way off, that we're way off base here, think about the ramifications of people getting through that shouldn't be through. Think about the ramifications of the Toronto Maple Leafs spending who knows how much money on some young kid, and then they can't hack it, and they could have picked it up. Okay. And to me, honestly, hockey's great. I know it's your national sport up there. It's all good and well, but dealing with people's human body and operating on them and doing things that can kill people is way more important to me than what happens in any sports
I agree 100%.
environment. And so if we do it in things that don't even matter as much, why are we not doing it when it's all no different than airline pilots? People that, any position that you can kill people is probably a good place to evaluate whether your makeup can deal with it, or at least if we can if you're in a range where we can at least get you. Okay. I mean, if you're way outside the range, maybe it's not for you, but maybe if you're on the cusp, then it's easy. Then we just train them with your techniques, right?
We spend more money on the already trained Olympic athlete, the already trained elite, athletic performer for a 2-week competition that happens every 4 years, provided the world's not at war or something like that. And they might have one day of competition. We spend more than we do on an entire surgical residence, 5 years, for a lifetime of high acuity situations, right? Of human factors, critical moments, data science, right? So from that perspective, this program I'm developing, it's meant to be at the Royal College level. It's meant as an educational platform.
Wonderful.
It's going to take us through this competence scale, right? I mean, what they've created is that right, this competence by design, and it's the competence continuum from the day you get in until the day you retire. And we have our MoComp, right? We have to update our skills all the time. Very important. I think it's important. Sure. You shouldn't just let loose on society once you're able to practice. You got to show that you can still do it. Look, I mean, I left surgery after 25 years, right? I left the OR to transform everything that I hope happens in the OR. And, but at every level of this competence continuum, we can impart training to take you to excellence, right? And so, given that we have to do these things anyway, it behooves us to do things that are scientifically proven, that have objective metrics, and we can take people and operate on them. But life, we've said you don't know when you're getting a tap on the shoulder. I'm talking about two things to close for maybe.
Yeah.
I lost a very dear friend this past week.
I'm
He,
sorry to hear that.
he, he was my addiction physician. He was a friend and a colleague, and he treated me like family. And his life was great. Boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, catastrophic illness. And within 6 weeks, he's passed away. Uh, he survived by two sons and a wife. For people who don't understand what it means to have someone's life in your hands, I'll say this: it was the most important thing that I've ever done, aside from raising children. Right? I put my life into it, and I'm continuing to. I mean, like, what I'm doing now is the embodiment of the last 40 years of my life. When someone dies on an operating room table, it doesn't happen frequently, but when it does, it's devastating. In my first year of practice, I was doing a liver resection, and everything was going perfect. And the patient was transfused a unit of blood. They didn't need it. There was no blood loss. They had an idiosyncratic reaction and went into DIC. That's bleeding that human hands can't control, as you know. And the patient hemorrhaged to death on the table because of a unit of blood that they didn't need. I had to go out and tell 20 family members. And I questioned, I was at this, I was considered top. I sat in the operating room for 6 hours, blood everywhere, nothing touched, waiting for the coroner, and questioned whether I should ever do another operation. Thankfully, I spoke to people that are like, this had nothing to do with you, and it didn't. But you want people to be perfect. So whoever's listening, this last point that we're talking about, that we can monitor and measure and determine who should or who shouldn't do it, I think is potentially important. But the beauty of this is we can train you to be the best that you can be. And world class is different for everybody. And we can help you to achieve it on a steady, consistent basis. I'm going to close up by saying, thanks for having me. And my friend Jake, Dr. Bobrowski, he'd be proud of what you do and how you speak, because you embody the values and the energy that he had and imparted upon everybody.
Well, thanks for sharing that tough story, and thanks really for for your words. That does mean a lot to me. It's been wonderful, talking to you today. I mean, we covered so much, and I think people are really going to love this episode, because you know what, you this is yourself. We could have sat here and gone through details of, oh, well, how does this work, and how does this, how would this wave, and surgery and things like that, and that's what makes this so great. And speaking of flow like states, that's why I love doing this, because these 2 hours we've spent together, our brain, we're intertwined here.
Absolutely.
And it's good. I can't be more focused than I am. I can't, like, I'm right on that finger, right now. And for those that heard that your story of your patient that you lost on the table, I can tell you as a surgeon, and thank goodness I've only lost a few patients over my 19 years. It is talking to the families, spending time. I've cried with families. I've prayed with families. I have lost nights and nights of sleep. I have a wonderful wife who's had to, like, literally talk me out of really dark places. Like, luckily, I'm very good at self-regulating and getting through it. I've got great partners to talk to and all this other stuff, but it is so devastating. And some people, it's not for everybody. it's not for everybody. And you know what? So maybe it's not, sometimes it's not for us because it's not good. I mean, it's not good for us. People don't understand internalizing a lot of this stuff is it eats away at you. And I talk to young people. I'm not trying to scare them out of being physicians. I just want them to know, and this is my own personal experience as a very busy spine surgeon, there's never a vacation I get to go on where stuff is not going on. There's never a dinner that I'm having with my family that I'm not thinking about some patient or something that's going on. That's just not the way it is. And you've got to be able to compartmentalize that and say, yes, you want to be the best for your patient, but you also have to step away and do those other things, because otherwise you just unravel. And that story, that story you just shared, man, that's why I talked about the surgeon to surgeon. I know that exact feeling. It is, you don't, and I've seen it. I've had professors that have had like young patients paralyzed in surgery and all kinds of very hard, and they have literally completely questioned whether or not they should be practicing anymore. Some have taken a month off just to be able to wrap their minds around some complication that happened. So it just, like, I understand that so deeply. So when you told me that story, like I feel like it happened to me as you were speaking, because I know that, I feel that, I know what that is.
I appreciate that. I mean, you live it. I mean, look, I did, I did Whipples. I did tons of Whipples. My mortality rate in a Whipple procedure was 0.68%. I mean, that's sort of unheard of. Best centers in the world are 1 to 3%. We were a center of excellence for that. But to have something, when it happens, it can happen to anybody. But it's the most devastating moment of your career. And I mean, look, I was emoting as I was remembering it. Like I put myself back there.
I can see it.
Visualize, kinesthetically, audibly and visually. I was there. I felt it.
Yeah, and I mean, and another way to put it as we wrap up here, every patient I've lost and their family members, it's like it's like all these other people that you lose. I mean, everybody has experience of losing family and friends. That's just life. But imagine then magnifying that to these other people that you lose, but also people that are not doing well, that are having issues, that things are going on. We are so intertwined with everybody's life. We're just part of their lives, and they're relying on us so heavily to just be that anchor for them. And meanwhile, you've got 1,000 other patients that you're dealing with, or whatever. And it is. It's really almost a superpower, and a lot of people have it, right? It really is a superpower to be able to manage that level of, I don't even want to call it stress, and you said it best, because it's not really the right word, that level of chaos, constant chaos. Okay, now this happened and that happened, and that's just what it is. Also, to mention that, I have clinics filled with all these sick people. I've hardly met them, and they're rolling in wheelchairs, and they're miserable, and they're sick, and we have to admit them to the hospital from some huge. It's always this stuff that's going on. It's nonstop. It's 24 hours a day. It's not like you don't, like, yeah, sure, I'm going to go on vacation for a month and everything will be fine. No, I mean, I was just on vacation in Italy, and yeah, people are like, oh, you're sending nice pictures, you're posting pictures of gondolas and this and that. Yes, but I was also dealing with my PAs who were calling me about patients that have issues. And so I had to make decisions, even from Italy. I know I have partners, but I still have to deal. You still have to deal.
Yeah,
So
24/7.
So 24/7. So in closing, because honestly, this it never feels like enough, especially when we're really just kind of in the zone. Speaking of the zone, it would have been nice to do our own EEGs while we were doing this, to see how in the zone we got. It would have been unbelievable. People would see that as we got deeper and deeper in the conversation, our EEGs would start looking the same. It's so
yeah,
interesting. So interesting.
hyperscanning and things like that. Most
Yeah.
definitely, in simpatico. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know what? Soon we're gonna have our own purpose-built device. So when we do, we'll come on, we'll get them going. We'll hook up, our HRV, our EEG, and surface muscle tension. Because the two of us, I've noticed the whole time we're sitting like this. We should be like,
Yeah. We do.
but that's because we're engaged and like we're
Yeah,
here.
we're engaged. I'm listen,
Wouldn't be good to perform, but for
yeah.
this,
No,
yeah.
I love these. I mean, I just get dialed in. I mean, I have such a passion about doing this podcast, and I've got some. I mean, this has been amazing. I got some very interesting people. I'm not gonna reveal it to anybody coming on board. Now, I'm excited. I take the energy like that I get from you, and then I use it to move on to the. It just I love doing this. So in closing, how do people find you? We'll put that. That'll be all on for those of you that are watching this on YouTube or something like that. We'll have it on the screen for you, but what's the best places, or where do you prefer them to find you so they can learn about your story, what you're doing with NextGen Surgery, what you're doing on socials? Just tell us where to go.
I think right now the best place for me is LinkedIn, Richard S. Hart, BA, MD, FRCSC. We're just starting to build the company site, nextgensurgery.com. We also have Recoverix, nextgenrecoverix.com. And that's a whole other thing that I do, the neurorehabilitation for stroke, MS, neurodegenerative disorders. Again, that it comes from my partners in technical partners in Europe, GTech Medical Engineering. So you can reach me at www.nextgenrecoverix.com as well. But LinkedIn is the best for me, and I would love it if people drop me a line. I love to chat. I always return messages and things like that. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to actually talk about it on here. I know we didn't go into. I tried not to go NextGen Surgery and detail because of the different variety of people.
Yeah,
I'd love to get in. I'd love to get into the weeds though with you sometime about it.
Yeah, we can. I mean, we obviously can do that offline, and we'll do it later. I just, what I'd love to do is I'd have you come out, and once you're kind of where you want to be, and your platform is ready and stuff. Why don't we come out? We can actually do a live show, and you can use me as your test subject. I'm actually launching a new YouTube series where I actually go with a camera crew to different types of locations. Maybe we can come out to you, and I'd love to come out there. I mean, I have a lot of relatives in Toronto, but we can do a lot of different things. Love to do
Cool.
that, and we can actually talk more, because I want to bring these stories to people, because I want to be used with my knowledge as a medium to take complex topics and be able to really explain it to the lay public, so they get really fired up and excited about what is really possible with humanity, with healing, with the spirit. I just love everything you're doing. So, really thankful that we were able to chat for, I think we're going on 2.5 hours here or so. It might be a little shorter when you folks are looking at this edited, because we'll cut out a little here and there when we're getting too many of the ums going and that kind of stuff. But other than that, this has been just incredible, and I look forward to having you on the program again.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Stefano. And I'm gonna 2.5. I'm jetting to Germany tonight. I'm going to speak at the Shift Medical Congress, so I got to gear up for that.
That's awesome. So anyway, for everybody that's watched this has been one of my absolute favorite episodes. Tell all your friends and family and your colleagues to go on your favorite channels where you get your podcasts, and listen to this one if you've been able to get to this part in the show, because obviously you liked it if you got to this part. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light. I can't wait to hear your comments on the links and the shorts that we'll put out, because this one had just so much for everyone. So we'll see you on the next episode. Be well, go out and be CEOs of your own health. Take care of yourselves. And if you're feeling like you're starting to get burnt out and just something's not right, please go get help, because it can go down really, really quickly. So go out there, get help for yourselves and your families, and we will see you on the next episode.